What's up, everybody? Armchair Quarterbacks here for another Week 6 recap. This one we've got Montekia versus Waddle Waddle Waddle. That's Shawn with a score of 103.80 versus Ken with a score of 105.84. So let's take a look at your team here, Shawn. This week you started Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, Amari Cooper, Jerome Ford, Isaiah Pacheco, Darren Waller, Raheem Mostert, and Christian Watson. So obviously, we were talking about it off camera, off recording here. But what did you actually like with your team this week?
For as weird as Buffalo Bills and their offense has looked, kind of struggling a little bit, they're still able to pull away with points. So obviously my Josh Allen and my Stephon Diggs stack here. I know every time I've made a trade offer, one of these guys, Diggs has been like a huge target. So these guys just always come through with me. I kind of make fun that, I'm writing these guys out into the sunset. I'm Bills Mafia, even as a Broncos fan. But
right.
I just love both of these guys. I've had Diggs, since we started playing fantasy. Josh Allen's always been huge for me. So even even on a low week, they still combine for 40 points, which for me is pretty awesome.
Yeah.
I believe Diggs too. I got a notification. Red Zone never showed it, but I guess Diggs had another catch that was almost a long touchdown. I think even my coworker was talking about it, and we, I don't think he watches football nearly as much as us. So, Diggs was the one play away from saving my week. So pretty solid with these guys.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's unfortunate that, I think you would have come out with a win here had either Cooper, Mostert played pretty decently for you instead of poorly like this week, or Christian Watson didn't leave the game with an injury. It's unfortunate.
I think at that point, Christian Watson's injury was irrelevant at that point. That game was over. That was towards the very end. So
right.
He wasn't going to do anything. The Raheem Mostert one, I'm not too worried about that usage there. He has a low game, but you had both Jeff Wilson Jr. and Salvin Ahmed coming in the rotation just to kind of get them, some usage.
Yeah.
It always feels like your player's never out there when it's your player, but then when you look at the stat line, it's like, no, still the number one.
Mm-hmm.
So at that point, it's just Philly has really, really great D front there. Waller here has a really good game.
Yep.
So it's kind of a bummer for me that we see all these tight ends go off, and the one week that Waller finally gets his touchdown, and the one week that New York is able to score their own touchdown, and solid game here from Pacheco. He kind of gets bailed out with the touchdown there, but he has some receiving work.
Yeah, he's always had some receiving work, which is the thing that's been helping him in his stat lines.
Yeah, even like I said, when I always complain and I feel like Pacheco is not getting used enough, it's typically not. Jerick McKinnon is out there on the third downs, to take away that usage, but McKinnon and CEH are typically not the ones that are, holding Pacheco down. If anything, it's the Mahomes to Kelsey stack, or Mahomes to your Rashee Rice, or Andy Reid is a pass first. So even if it's not to the running backs, this is kind of hit or miss.
Yeah, true. I was taking a look at your Jerome Ford here. I was getting his injury leaving the game early, or kind of in and out of the game early, mixed up with the Christian Watson injury. Even though, well, let's take a look at Jerome Ford. He was in and out, it says, after the first quarter. So if he was able to go even a full half at normal status, I think he would have had even a higher stat line for you. He would have probably had, instead of 11 attempts, maybe 15 attempts rushing.
Yeah, I know. Most of this was on that first. That first was I forget if it was it was a rush. That first rush,
Yeah.
where he went off for that touchdown.
Mm-hmm.
The beginning of red zone, actually. So, it looks like from the news, it's probably going to be a high ankle sprain. They say low grade.
Mm-hmm.
I take that with a grain of salt. He'll probably have a high ankle sprain, and that'll probably be at least 2 weeks.
All right, so let's take a look at your bench here. You mentioned it earlier. You should have started Ramondre Stevenson. You know, that was one of those things where it's just like hit or miss. You don't know how he's gonna do up against Buffalo. New England and Ramondre Stevenson haven't been playing the greatest as of late. So I don't blame you for benching him here. You also had Darrell Henderson and Jackson Smith and Jigba. I believe both of those players you picked up during Sunday or after the games, I believe, right?
So Jackson Smith and Jigba was actually during the game. That's just a just in case,
right?
With DK Metcalf,
right?
And I mean, hopefully for the post by rookie bump for him. The Henderson one, I had both Henderson and Royce Freeman at one point, just on the news that, you know, it really sounded like Sean McVay and the Rams still do not trust Zach Evans.
Yeah.
You know, so I think he's supposed to get some time, and Myles Gaskins is supposed to come up next week. But I think even with Henderson kind of being out of game shape, I believe the Rams and Sean McVay still trust him for the pass pro, still trust him in the third and long downs or anything like that where they need a pass catching back.
Well, they're familiar with him, so that makes sense.
I mean, and for Royce Freeman, I mean, everyone knows what he is, even back from the Broncos. You know, when he was with the Broncos. So at this point, we're just waiting to see kind of how Myles Gaskin, because he's more of a pass catching back. We'll see how that fares, but I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Henderson, hopefully in my favor, but honestly, just in general, Sean McVay's history is, you know, even something like a Todd Gurley, just run him into the ground.
Yeah.
I could see Henderson getting all the usage until my Williams is back. I think Kyron Williams will probably most likely be fully healthy towards the playoffs. So we'll see.
Yeah, I agree. All right, so let's take a look here at Ken's team. Ken this week started Tua Tagovailoa, Jalen Waddle, Keenan Allen, Josh Jacobs, Brian Robinson, Travis Kelce, Michael Pittman Jr., and Cortland Sutton. Earlier we were talking off camera. I was saying, you know, Ken's week was saved here with Travis Kelce. 31.9 points. He had 12 receptions for 179 yards and a TD. That's ridiculous. 179 yards.
So
go ahead.
I would say so, you know, I could lament, at least for me, I think you know, like my Ramondre Stevenson, it's always when you're looking back trying to analyze your team, kind of see what you did right and did wrong. You know, at some point it's just a gamble, you know, you weigh your pros and cons. For me, it was Christian Watson against Denver's poor defense, who have been playing better, or Ramondre Stevenson with a time split against Buffalo, right? So those were my two decisions there. The interesting thing here with Ken's team is what also makes it frustrating for me losing is this is just a bad week for Ken. You know, look at this, 11 points from Tua, 9 points from Waddle with a bad back now. So we'll see. Keenan Allen here with only 7 points. Josh Jacobs with only 4 points. So realistically, this was kind of this just shows the variance and the luck here with fantasy football. Because in any other given week, this could be a 140, 150 point team right here.
Yep, definitely.
This is a solid, for me. Ken's team is actually a really huge sleeper team here. Yeah. Even back when his record might have been a little bit worse. This for me is, you know, a really solid build here. And he has James Conner when he gets healthy again. Romeo Dobbs here is pretty solid, especially if my Christian Watson, I already dropped him. So if Christian Watson's out with an MCL, or even just a sprain, pretty solid team here. So
Yeah, I agree. And, I have to talk about it because I have Justin Herbert. Keenan Allen, it was just a down game, like you were saying. He had 9 targets. So if you look at those 9 targets, that's consistent with being the top receiving option on the team. That's just the Chargers were not playing well at all.
uh,
I
would say
know
on
some of those targets were overthrown on Keenan Allen.
I would say on top of that, for all of for all the years where Kansas City has had such a great offense with Kelsey and Tyreek Hill
Mhm.
being there together with that 1-2 punch, I think now it's kind of the opposite. They only have Kelsey and then a whole bunch of ancillary pieces.
Yeah.
And at this point, it's switched, and their defense is so much better that
Yep.
now it looks like they're just gonna, they might be the formula with the Broncos when my boys won the Super Bowl in 2015.
Yeah.
They're
Win
gonna
it with
rely on that
defense.
defense.
Yeah.
They're gonna win it with defense. That defense is really gonna get the ball back. They already have a great quarterback there, so points are not an issue. And I mean, everyone in the football betting community thought this game was going to be higher scoring. So, and it wasn't. 48's not bad, but we were thinking. I mean, look, remember the Indian Cleveland game? I mean, I can't believe that one with 77
70
points.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I agree. I was expecting a higher scoring game output for this as well. This matchup. Like I said, it's just unfortunate that the Chargers, they haven't been playing well. I think that's in continuity with the Justin Herbert broken finger injury. So it's one of those things where it's going to take some time for the Chargers to kind of get back into it. Taking a look here at Ken's bench. You mentioned Romeo Dobbs. He also had Gus Edwards go off on his bench for 21.9 points. Do you expect Gus Edwards to be consistent like this rest of season?
the interesting thing here is the 80 receiving yards.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see how many. I mean, he only had 1 reception, so that was kind of just a fluky thing there. That's not really. Yeah, you're not going to see that. For me, I'm not sure. It's always been hard to, even when we had J.K. Dobbins healthy, it's always been hard to kind of figure out how their rushing game is going to be, just because Lamar Jackson is such a threat and he takes away. He's such a huge vulture on the goal line.
Right.
If I'm looking at this, and the funny thing is, typically I would say, yeah, go ahead, play Gus Edwards over my Cortland Sutton here. But honestly, I don't think I don't think the Broncos offense is their problem. I've heard some of the Broncos beat writers say, Russell Wilson probably not going to be there next year. We'll see. They'd have to eat like $80 million, something crazy.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think I don't think they're the problem. So if anything, Sutton you could keep here. Pittman for sure you're keeping here. You got saved on a 75. This is what really killed me my week. Not Kelsey. Kelsey's going to get those points. Cleveland, for as great as their defense is, gave up a 75-yard touchdown towards the end of the game for Pittman. So Pittman, I expect him to get more. So you're keeping him in here. The one you could probably say is maybe Brian Robinson. Do you put Gus Edwards in for Brian Robinson because Baltimore has a better defense, more touchdown equity?
Yeah. And the other thing too with Gus Edwards, I should say for Baltimore, their passing game got back on track this week. So it's, if it stays like this, I think it's not going to be consistent at 21. But I think I can I can see consistency at maybe 10 to 15. And as your wide receiver 2 flex, that's pretty decent.
I mean,
Or running
I
back,
will
I should say.
I will say we do have to remember that this, I mean, 6-38. This was a blowout, and this game was over.
True.
Obviously, they're going to run it, so let's not forget that context. But and the interesting thing is Brian Robinson. I think it was Michelle that had Antonio Gibson. He at that point he might be droppable. Whoever had Brian or Antonio Gibson, yeah, he might be droppable at this point. So because Brian Robinson was getting even some of the third down, the passing role,
Yeah.
even if he didn't have a reception.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I definitely agree. But yeah, I mean, looking at next week's schedule, Gus Edwards has Arizona. So it's possible you might see a pretty decent game from him again next week. So I think I would look at possibly playing him.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, that'll do it for this one here. Congrats on the win, Ken. Good luck next week to you both, but we'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace out.